about all my preaching in this congregation, and I didn't get much response. We'll have to start over again. Would that we could. It'd be great. We have an interesting gospel lesson this morning. And it's one of the gospel lessons, the miracles that all gospel writers wrote about it. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And as you and I read our gospel lesson, we can become excited about what's happening. God is in charge. Everything's working well. Everything's going well. Hoorah, let's continue. But then again, when we begin to look at the chapter, or to look at the miracle of the bringing peace there at the storm, we might see even more than that is positive and glory and good for us. You know, they were, as Matthew wrote this, Matthew was known as the gospel writer that spent more time being sure that he was right about what Jesus was and did than what the other writers had given. Let's listen just for a few moments to something of what was being said by Matthew, by Jesus to the disciples. In my early days of ministry, I was an intern at Reformation Lutheran Church in Columbia with Dr. Kenneth Hewitt. Now, Dr. Hewitt was like a father image to me, but a very powerful pastoral minister. And he would stay right where he needed to stay to do the work that he needed to have done. But then when we begin to look at what happens through this story, we begin to see a lot of real hard faith trusting. You and I have the faith to get in a boat. And let's hope it's not with the other 11 disciples, because I don't think the boat was that big. So you and I, in the midst of the trials and tribulations of life, we look for God to bring us peace. We look for bringing peace for ourselves and only for ourselves. If that is the case, then we've missed the gospel lesson for today. The gospel lesson is very plain and clear to us that what Matthew is saying of Jesus and what Jesus is saying of the Matthew account is that there can be peace, but it may come with a struggle. Now, when I mentioned Dr. Hewitt, I asked him one day, what was the greatest hour of the day for the pastor? What was the one item, 1 hour that could bring complete rest to him as a pastor? And what he said was true, I think. He said what brings the greatest comfort in a week's time for the pastor is Sunday morning after the worship service. When you've done your best to do your best to meet the needs of the people, when you follow through with your work all week, the rest that you really appreciate more than anything else is the hour that follows Sunday worship on Sunday morning. Our world is in a mess. I don't need to tell you that. You know that. You see the news like I do. You don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks to get schools back going. It's in a mess. And how are we going to ever get it straightened out? Not at all, unless we become God's people, healed in his grace and loved in his power. You see, God goes with us one-on-one. But then he intends going with us one-on-one that we go one-on-one with others, so that we come up with solutions that everybody participates in the game of life and everybody wins in the game of life. I like the way Jesus performed this morning. I think it's interesting. How did these guys get on the boat anyway? If we read the gospel lesson, they said that they got on the boat because he told them to get on the boat. Or did he push them to get on the boat? But anyway, they were fishermen. They ought to know the ocean. They ought to understand the water. And yet, they seem to have some difficulty in understanding the ghost of the water. You know, after a big feast or a celebration, we have to clean up, and then we do the things we need to do. Well, what we have to understand here is that this experience came to the disciples at the end of the feeding of the 5,000. Note that Jesus put them on the boat and told them he would see them later. And then he got on his right and walked up to the mountaintop in order to talk with God. First and foremost, he walked up onto the mountaintop in order to talk to God, which may be the first thing we ought to do too. When life confronts us with confusion and madness and hysteria and all the other things that come along, we ought to be able to walk up to God first and feel His Spirit and His love and His power in our lives. Then we become the instrument through which He will send into the world. Jamie, and I can't remember his last name, he's a guy running for senator in our state. And a commercial, and you've seen it as well as I've seen it, in which he says something about his parents, and then he goes on to say, that still power voice that I hear every time there's a struggle, and I can see the peace of God in that one statement, that I am totally released and relaxing for the moment. How often and how much do we allow God to massage us in our struggles and difficulties and attitudes about life? And we ask that question, which becomes very important. But one more important than that is, what do you and I do when we've had that message with what the message brings to us? If we read the last part of the gospel lesson this morning, it simply says, they all believed and had faith. If Christ were looking at you today and all that you have going on in your life, all that I have going on in my life, He very clearly probably could say to me, peace be with you. And I'd probably feel it, at least for the moment. But that's what life is about. Life is about meeting the conflict of the world in the illustration and in the mission of God, not in the mission of ourselves. I go back to putting on masks. You know, what a place that was whenever they started doing that and saying we had to wear them. People came up, I'm not going to wear them. Don't want to wear them. They make me look funny. Well, that might all look funny. But they say that. And we say the same thing. You know, we're not going to wear them either. Yet when they say that you wear the mask because it's a must. If I heard the news correctly last night, and I may not have, but I might have, the mayor of New York, the governor, New York was the first time last night they had no deaths or sickness added to the list of the virus in their life. A place that was inundated from all angles and all sides when this thing broke out. But a place that night before last could say, we did not have any new patients, and ones we have seemed to have done well, but no deaths during the night. And if we take that as the story it is, and apply it to the meaning of life, it helps us understand that God's Spirit is alive in our lives because God chooses for it to be there. He does not send us out. He does not encourage us. He does not involve us with Himself or with others without first going with us as He sends us. The earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. So you and I think about the week that's confronting us and the week that's going to confront us after that, and the excitement we're going to have as we prepare to enter church for worship on a Sunday, and preparing to have communion, bringing all that to a top story on this building that we have in terms of the message of God here. We have enormous opportunities before us, large opportunities before us. There are things in life for each one of us. And you may know them and you may not know them. I think there's some we know and some we don't know. But for every one of us, we know that there is peace in the Spirit and the presence and the gift of God in our lives, and is willing to hold us together. That should be where we are when we look at what's going to happen in the next 1, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Let's hope not that long. That some kind of normalcy comes to school and we get things going again. But those words, Jamie says, the peace of the Lord be with you, is like Jesus stepping over to the side of the boat, reaching down and grabbing Peter under the shoulders and picking him up out of the water. Can God not do the same for you and me and for the world in which we live? We can, He can, and will, if our faith looks up to Him. Amen.